constantly learning new things about all the different social media things. So we're just going to be here today to kind of share our education background on anything that we know um, going forward. Let's see, Megan's going to share her screen here. Also, so Megan is in District 833, which is South Washington schools, and she primarily works in the middle schools. We also have Matt McCune, who also works in 833, who works in the ALC and the high schools. I am in two different districts, 834, which is Stillwater, and 622, which is Maplewood, Oakdale, North St. Paul. And then we also have Taylor Ward, who is also in 622, who works in the high schools in North St. Paul, Oakdale, Maplewood. So this is kind of just a little bit of background about the Youth Service Bureau. You know, we are contracted in the schools for school-based chemical health specialists. We also have youth and family education, diversion services, and therapy. So, and we have 3 different locations. So it's actually really nice to be able to get to us. All right, Megan.
Yeah, we'll just jump right in here. So yeah, we'll be covering just an array of different trends that we have seen in our work among youth in the school. So we'll kind of, like you said, just jump in here. So the data that we've collected here is taken from the 2019 Minnesota Student Survey. And so these numbers presented are specifically from Washington County students. And we'll start with the highest numbers and kind of go downward. 20.6% of students reported using an e-cigarette or on one or more days within the last 30 days. 15.7% of students reported any use of alcohol in the last 30 days. 9.9% of students said they used marijuana in the past 30 days. 3.8% of students shared that they used prescription drugs not prescribed for them in the last 30 days. 2.7% of students reported smoking a cigarette on one or more days within the last 30 days. And lastly, 1.6% of students used inhalants within the last 30 days. So of course, you know, some of these numbers seem fairly low, but for us, any number of young people using is too many. I don't know if anybody wants to share, like, were they surprised by any of these numbers? Did anything stand out?
Well, I actually expected marijuana to be higher.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, when we do the Minnesota Student Survey, I'm not sure if they put, you know, nowadays they have the e-cigarettes or the vapes where they put the marijuana concentrate or the marijuana oil. That's technically still marijuana use. You know, that's not vape use. So it's kind of a gray area where I don't think that there's maybe a ton of kids maybe nowadays just smoking marijuana straight, you know, like a joint or anything, but they are using the oil. And I know it's incredible. Last year, actually the last 2 years, when I would go into the classroom and do the presentations, and I had, you know, a Juul up there, and I would have, you know, a Soren or different types of vapes. Each kid could tell me exactly which one it was. And that just blew my mind that they actually know, even if they said that they're not using it or whatever, they know exactly which one is which. But then I would put a cigarette up there and they're like, oh, gross, that's disgusting. But then the vape said the exact same thing. And I think we have a question. How do the numbers line up in the past years? So obviously, the vaping and the e-cigarettes are a lot higher. But it's actually been pretty steady. The marijuana and the alcohol have always been up on the higher end. But again, the vaping and the e-cigarettes have obviously skyrocketed over the last 2 years. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Are we good to I'm not good at looking at the chat at the same time, so you're on it, Nikki.
I got it.
And
All
I
right.
can certainly, Nikki and Megan, this is Betsy, I'll monitor it too, and just, sort of send you a message and bring it to your attention or speak up.
Sure. Thank you so much. All right. So Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generation created these campaigns. One is titled, Is Big Tobacco in Your Kid's Backpack, and Is Big Tobacco on Your Kid's Desk? As you can see here, there are many products that can be sadly hidden in plain sight. Many of them look like electronic devices, like USB drives and highlighters and all sorts of different products that are very easily disguised.
I tell this story every single time I talk about this. So if you guys have heard any of my presentations, you've probably heard this 1,000 times. But I had a student that I worked with in the middle school, went to the state fair with their family. And at that time, anybody could buy e-cigarettes. We didn't have the 21 and older or anything. Well, the parents ended up buying the e-cigarette thinking it was a flash drive. The kid told the parents that it was a flash drive that he needed for school, but in reality, it was a jewel. And this is kind of when like the jewel started becoming big. So the parents bought it straight up for them, not knowing that it was a vape. It's just this incredible story.
Yeah, that is unreal. So in addition to more of the tech-looking devices, companies have also designed and marketed additional products to appeal to youth. And these products were designed to look like everyday items such as lipstick and hoodies, so they can be disguised very easily. Puff bars, pictured in the middle right there, are also incredibly popular among youth. And it sounds like, or what I've seen is that they're becoming more popular than the traditional vaping devices because it's lower cost, they're disposable, and they come in flavors, which have been banned for traditional or those traditional vaping devices.
Yeah.
Nikki, have you had any experiences with these?
Yes. So that's what I was just going to add. I never knew about the lipstick there on the right. And I went to a meeting in Dakota County and they had one there. And it looks so incredibly real. I mean, the color on the actual lipstick part was so real looking that you would have never known that that was a vape. And the sweatshirt is actually getting a lot more popular. Obviously, I've asked the kids in all the classes if they've ever seen it or whatever, and they're just minds are blown that this is actually out there. But it is, and I always have like the kids like that have the sweatshirts on lift up their ties on the sweatshirts, and I was like, that's a vape, it actually goes in there, and they're just blown away that there's people out there that actually use this stuff.
And this is kind of already mentioned this, Nikki, but in addition to vaping tobacco, it's become a widespread practice to vape marijuana. So marijuana concentrate is a highly potent THC concentrated mass that looks like honey or butter as pictured here. Marijuana concentrates contain extraordinarily high THC levels, ranging from 40 to 80% THC amounts. And this form of marijuana can be up to 4 times stronger in THC content than high-grade marijuana. And to date, we don't know the long-term effects of marijuana concentrate. But of course, as we can see here, as I move on, the most recent research suggests that vaping THC oil can actually be quite harmful to lung health. The greatest concern at the moment is the severe effects of inhaling vitamin E acetate. This additive chemical has been found in many vaping products that contain THC. And you may remember hearing about EVALI or e-cigarette vaping associated lung injury. This lung disease came about, hospitals started seeing between the years of like 2018 to 2020, and caused many, many young people to end up in the hospital from vaping.
So Megan, can you go back to the slide previous to this one? So I just wanted to add just a little visual to this. So in a normal, let's say we roll a joint of marijuana, in that marijuana actual herb of it, there's about 2 to 5% level of THC, which still is a pretty decent amount of THC in it to get you high. In this marijuana concentrate or the oil or the honey or the butter, they actually boil it down to nothing but THC. So it can be up to like 90 to 95% pure THC, which is going to get you extremely high very fast. And that can have, adverse effects of mental health stuff, like the anxiety, the paranoia, just because it's so potent and gets into your body so fast because it's an oil and you vape it. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry. I just wanted to add another little tidbit to this too, is what I'm really interested in is to see what we obviously haven't been talking about EVALI as much because COVID has completely taken over the world. But when we see the lasting long-term effects of COVID and children that have had COVID and then they start vaping, what is this going to do to their lungs? If they have the COVID and the vaping on top of it. So I'm really interested to see kind of what happens, with the long-term effects of all of this. The last numbers that I've had that I found on the CDC website, again, this was in early 2020. They haven't updated it because, again, COVID. There was, I believe, about 2,000 people that have been hospitalized because of vaping, and about 500 that have passed away because of it. And we've had 4 in Minnesota alone. So again, that was in early 2020. We haven't had any updated numbers since then.
Those are really significant numbers. And Nikki, too, you mentioned COVID. Some of the numbers that I've heard too is for somebody who's vaping, they're like 5 times more likely to get COVID, and the effects of COVID are much stronger for those who are vaping, and of course, even stronger for those who are vaping and smoking traditional cigarettes.
Absolutely. And it decreases your immune system. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Megan, where you're way more vulnerable to get any type of illness if you're vaping.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So another trend, since I have started at YSB, I have learned that Stillwater High School has actually been given the nickname Pillwater due to the amount of students misusing prescription medications. Teens are having what are called farm parties. So they are bringing whatever medications they can find at home, they put them in a bowl and they can choose at random. This, of course, can be exceptionally dangerous if they are mixing it with alcohol or they're on their own medications that are actually prescribed to them.
Yeah, this is extremely terrifying. And this is true. I've also heard it from multiple students in different districts that they've heard that this has been happening or have been at some place where they've seen this happen. Students are getting it from their parents, they're getting it from their grandparents, parents or friends' parents, if they have a bathroom cabinet that's got all the medication in it, they can just go in and snag it. Maybe they're not taking the whole bottle, maybe they're just taking a couple of them. But the fact that, the kids are just dipping into this bowl of pills and taking whatever they have there, who knows what they're taking?
Yeah, very dangerous.
And then there's some I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I, again, fly by the seat of my pants. Farm party slang, trail mix, party bowl or punch bowl party, farm party, recipe farming. You know, it's crazy to think like if you hear a kid talking about trail mix, you're not going to automatically think about a prescription medication party. You're going to think it's a, you know, the peanuts and chocolate and the trail mix. But you just need to be aware that, you know, these are some of the slang words, and we'll get into a little bit more about like social media slang too.
All right. And this was taken from an article on this in the Star Tribune. So it's just a little blurb. It says, in recent months, the counterfeit and box pills named for their signature imprint have been blamed on a large number of overdoses and overdose deaths in numerous cities throughout Minnesota. Local authorities have seized thousands of these pills, which are designed to look like brand name 30 milligram oxycodones, but are laced with unpredictable amounts of fentanyl and its analogs, compounds that share structural similarities. And I know, Nikki, you were going to speak more on this as well.
Yep. So kind of what triggered Megan and I to really kind of dive into the social media and the drugs and all of that with youth is because of a news article that came out about a therapist, a pretty famous celebrity therapist in California. Son had overdosed at home. And this was during lockdown. This was during remote learning. And she thought, you know, he was at home, everything was fine, never had a clue that he was using any type of substances. But he did get a hold of one of these box pills. And it was loaded with fentanyl, and nobody had known that.
He emailed me too saying that he can't find, what did he say? Shoot, I just paused that.
And his mom was texting.
That's okay. So her son actually got these pills off of Snapchat. So he was friends with a drug dealer in the area and told his mom that he was just going out for a walk around the block because he needed some fresh air after remote learning and Zooming all day, and ended up meeting this drug dealer and ended up getting these box pills and overdosed. There's a similar story that actually happened in Roseville also. I believe it was Roseville, Minnesota. And these box pills, they say that they're 30 milligrams of oxys, but they are loaded with fentanyl. And we've heard multiple times that even just like the smallest amount of fentanyl can kill you instantly. So they're misbranded that they're just 30 milligrams of oxys, which is still extremely high, but it also is loaded with fentanyl.
Yep.
And who knows if a kid gets a hold of this and goes to one of those farm parties and snags one of them. It's
right.
Incredibly terrifying.
And as you can see here from the charts, the misuse of prescription pain medication among young people in Minnesota is a huge concern. Is anybody surprised or alarmed by any of the numbers?
So it looks like on the graph on the left, 11th grade has spiked, and so is 8th grade. Yeah, it's very alarming. And, you know, this goes to show too, you know, the opiate epidemic, you know, people keep talking about it, but nothing's really happening with it. But this just goes to show it's not just with older people, it's really amongst the younger kids too. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this is just so easy to get just because we have our medication cabinets. So when we say, you know, lock them up, put them in your safe, put them someplace that the kids are not going to find or can't get into, we really mean it because this is happening.
All right, and kind of moving on here, Nikki mentioned this, you know, slang and street names. Kids are getting incredibly savvy, especially as it comes to substance use. So here we have some common slang or street names for various substances that are they're used among youth. And, you know, of course, some of these are very well known and others are certainly not. And, you know, they're changing constantly. And so to keep on top of it is really important and really urgent, but also really hard.
I did just want to kind of point out the MDMA. So what MDMA is it is a kind of a hallucinogenic. It's type of ecstasy. So ecstasy is usually cut with like MDMA and either like cocaine or meth. But MDMA, Molly is also one that is just pure MDMA. It's not usually cut with anything. So I know like MDMA or Molly was a big trend probably 3-4 years ago, but I really haven't heard many people talking about that since. But that's just a little bit tidbit on that. Let's see, is there anything else on here? You know, the depressants, Xanax, Xanax, and I'm totally blanking on what the other one is, the big one. Xanax and I'm totally blanking. Totally
Benzos?
Yeah, just benzos in general. So the anti-anxiety medication is also a big concern, not just the opiates. Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on what the other, like Xanax and
Valium.
Valium. There we go. Xanax and Valium is huge amongst the kids too. They think it's going to calm them down and help them relax a little bit, but it usually spikes it up a little bit.
And of course, we know too that they're oftentimes mixing different
Right.
substances.
Exactly.
And to go along with that too, we have some terms that teens often use to address, you know, buying, selling, or using substances. So, you know, we're of course hearing kids talk about it, but also seeing it in text messages on social media. So just to be aware of kind of some lingo or terms to be cognizant of and to be listening for.
Yeah, this is just kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah. And this was really intriguing to me. So in addition to texting in different codes and different lingo, teens are now using emojis to communicate about substances. So some symbols are obvious, like a pill or a syringe, and others aren't as straightforward. So for instance, the dashing away symbol, like a puff of air, could refer to vaping. The dancing woman might signal that someone is ready to party. The spaceship emoji is often used to indicate the potency of a drug. The plug emoji is often used to refer to a drug dealer, connector, supplier, someone who can provide you with drugs. And Nikki, do we have anybody in the chat? I think I saw somebody pop up.
So Jamie said keychains on backpacks on persons to be aware for stash keychains can be sold at any age. Also social media terms, emojis, and hashtags. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe this is like way back, but some people, you know, in the 70s and maybe 80s used to have a necklace with a little vial that had like their cocaine in it, and it kind of maybe would look like sand or something. But nowadays people are putting it on their backpacks. I have seen this or heard of this, where they can put their stash or whatever in it and it just looks like a keychain. And yeah, you can buy it at any age. So yeah, I encourage you guys to go to that chat and check that link out that Jamie put on there. People are just way too savvy and crazy about this stuff. So if we already weren't confused by all the abbreviations nowadays with text messaging, now we have emojis to kind of worry about. The rocket ship, the girl dancing, the syringe. Now we have to decipher that stuff too.
And even furthermore, these emojis are often linked to specific substances themselves. And an interesting fact that I had read somewhere is that emojis can now be used in court, which was really interesting. Some of these, are, again, self-explanatory. Some are totally surprising, always changing, hard to keep track of. And so we just, in our work with parents and teachers, we oftentimes just encourage them to, as much as possible, to keep up on it.
You guys have any questions on any of this stuff? Obviously, we don't know exactly for opiates and depressants. I can ask some of my kids when I start back to school. That's my best education and knowledge is from all the kids that I meet with. So.
All right. And Nikki, of course, mentioned this as well earlier. But in this age of technology, we, of course, have to address how kids are getting drugs via social media. What we've learned is that 73% of people who report purchasing illegal drugs did so over social media apps. The relationship between social media and drug use is multi-layered. One factor is that the consumption of illegal substances is normalized and glamorized on social media platforms. Secondly, social media allows users and dealers to stay in touch very easily.
So Snapchat is still a big thing with kids because it's perfect for them because it deletes. So they can take a video or they can chat with somebody and it deletes and goes into thin air. So again, going back to the story of these kids that were overdosing and were getting their or their pills or their drugs from a drug dealer on social media. These drug dealers are purposely seeking out kids around that age. I actually have a student that I was working with at one of my schools that had a drug dealer on their Snapchat. He said he never used them or never reached out, but just thought it was funny to watch them. He showed me some of the stuff that he would send over to the student, and it was just incredible that this drug dealer or this person was able to find this 14, 15-year-old and has been trying to make deals with him over social media, over Snapchat, because it just disappears so easily. The other one that's not on here is TikTok. TikTok is huge. It is a video kind of like Instagram where they have videos and it doesn't disappear. However, they have, it's called Blowing Clouds, where it's like artists that are vaping and they do like different artistry techniques of blowing all of the vapor, and some of the kids love to watch it and then they want to try it, and then that's what makes them want to vape or get addicted to the vape, is because they're trying to be a vape artist. I think that's, Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. Facebook is kind of they don't do Facebook anymore really. But those are the hot ones for our age of kids. The WhatsApp app is a little bit newer too. It's an app where they can call or text or whatever anybody in the world. So some kids can be on there and talk to somebody over in Europe. And it doesn't, I'm not really sure, but I just know it's kind of like they can talk to anybody on there.
And what's alarming to me, especially as, a mom of young kids, I'm at that age where I have no clue what any of these are or how to use them. I mean, some of them I do, but it's shocking that there's so many of them and they're evolving and kids are getting hooked to them instantly. And it feels impossible to keep up with.
Yep. Well, and the kids are so savvy, technologically savvy, that they can go on and change the app. So let's say the Snapchat app. It's that little ghost. Everybody knows it. They can change that app to something else. So a lot of them use a calculator, little kind of app picture that changes it. So instead of, it's still Snapchat, but you're not going to find it on their phone because it's the calculator.
Wow, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even, they're in their phone book. Maybe they have, friends or their drug dealer, whoever, as a different name or an emoji. So always just kind of keep an eye on that stuff too. WhatsApp app in the chat says WhatsApp app is a free messaging, video calling, and calling app. Right. Yep. So, and I believe you can use it with just like anybody as long as they have the app too. But yeah, it's incredible what some of the kids can do with all of their social media apps. And like I said, I think the best way to really understand it is just asking these kids about it because they are smart cookies, too smart.
And if you get the right ones, they tell all.
Yeah. Yes.
A 2011 survey conducted by the National Center on Addiction and Substance Use at Columbia University found that teenagers who regularly use social media were more likely to drink, use drugs, and buy tobacco than adolescents who either did not use social media or used it less. And this may be due to the concept of perfection pressure, which is the idea that everyone else is having more fun than you. This concept can tempt teens into making risky decisions, or it can cause them to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol.
Well, and social media in general is an addiction in itself. We talk a lot about, if any of the students are, I've even had this happen myself. If I post a picture on Instagram of my family, you want to keep going back on there to see how many people have seen it, how many people have liked it. And that helps your self-esteem. And especially in adolescence, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that reassurance from your peers that they like you, they liked that picture. What's the comment, So they're constantly doing that to up their self-esteem. And then when you throw drugs and alcohol into it too, that's a whole nother ball game. If they're on there being a vape artist, if they're out there, blowing the smoke and trying to be the vape artist, they're just gonna keep being reassured to keep doing that. They want to get the likes, they want to be out there with their peers, they want to be that cool person. So the drugs or the social media in general is a drug in itself.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, we know that social media and smartphones are quicker and more efficient than methods of the past. Essentially, it's free advertising and easier than other methods. It's also safer than, what we call street buy scenarios. And then, of course, social media privacy settings allow drug dealers to hide in plain sight, which is very scary.
Yep. Free advertising. So before, the vaping became what it is now, I always talk to my students when they would go on YouTube and watch videos, they always had the commercials in there. Before, it used to be Juul commercials. They used to show how cool it was, how they wanted young people to try it. Now it's anti-vape. Now it's the anti-tobacco commercials. So it has been changing, but it is free advertisement. This is just easy for them to advertise to that exact vulnerable adolescent stage. And also just ads all over. They can track what you go and see on your phone. So, if you end up going to a Juul site just to get more information, you're going to see on your social media that ads come up. It is tracking what you see. And so if some of these students go to, a vape website or something, they're going to see that advertisement a little bit more.
Yeah. And kind of what you had mentioned too, even just with Snapchat and that student of yours who said he doesn't use it, but that the person sending the photos, I
Right.
mean, getting the word out and getting his name out and, or, you know, his profile out. And yeah, it's easy and just a click.
Yep.
And similar to what we've been talking about here, pharmacies is a code word that's often used by drug smugglers to create seemingly legitimate groups to sell their products. Dealers can get away with it because they label their products as research, experimental, not intended for human consumption. We also see this in convenience stores that sell like K2 or Spice, which is often labeled as potpourri. People who end up being victim to these, you know, groups or pharmacies tend to be poor, poorly educated, unemployed, and vulnerable. And of course, that's oftentimes our teenagers. However, the one good thing about all of this is that no matter the encryption, no matter the privacy, digital dealings always leave a trail. So I know that law enforcement has been doing quite a bit to try to, you know, be on top of the people that are doing these different dealings. So yeah. Okay. I guess any questions before we kind of move on to the next section? So moving on to kind of a different topic, but very relevant, is that we need to, you know, address the racial disparities as they relate to trends in teen substance use. And so when I had spoken with a regional alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs prevention coordinator, what she said was that research on this topic is very focused on treatment accessibility and service issues in non-white compared to white. The big picture is that it all goes back to structural racism and health inequities ingrained in the US and in our state. And so while we won't dive into it a whole lot deeper, there are many good articles that this coordinator had sent me and directed me to. So I encourage you to reach out and do further research. And to kind of tie it back into our youth here, in the 2019 Minnesota Student Survey, you can see some of the racial inequities that we have posted here. And I know Nikki and I have even seen it within our own schools.
Yeah, so when Megan and I were prepping for this on Tuesday, you know, we got into a really good conversation about this slide specifically. So I work in two completely different districts, I should say. And in one of my districts, I will say the majority or all of the consequence referrals that I get, you know, if they were caught with a vape or marijuana or anything on school grounds, have been biracial. And so that is something that I know as our chemical health team for this next 2021-2022 school year is we're going to dive into that a little bit more and understand kind of what's going on. So that is on our agenda for this upcoming school year.
Yeah, and as Nikki shared that with me too, I said, you know, because I'm so new to this position, last year being my first year, I looked back and recognized as well that the students that I were seeing voluntarily versus my consequences kids, my kids who were sent to me because of a consequence were all kids of color. Whereas the kids that I was seeing voluntarily, mostly because of, you know, parental use, just because I'm with middle school students, but those students that were coming to me voluntarily were Caucasian students. Yep. So just concerning and intriguing to learn more about that. And so why are we seeing these trends among young people? Well, factors such as social media play a huge role in our current trends. We also know that there's kind of 8 primary frequently identified reasons teens use. So instances peers or friends are using, or they see it on popular media. They may be using it as a way to escape negative feelings or experiences, otherwise known as self-medicating. We had mentioned that before. Many teens claim they start using because of boredom, rebellion, curiosity, immediate gratification. Teens who use may, lack the confidence to stand up to peers or have misinformation about various substances. And I know Nikki had mentioned that a little bit too, where, kids are like, oh no, we don't smoke traditional cigarettes, but vaping's okay. But when we educate our students, they're alarmed to know that, vaping devices have significantly higher amounts of nicotine than traditional cigarettes. So a lot of misinformation among youth is a huge reason for use.
And that's like one of my favorite parts about my job at YSB is just being able to go into the health classrooms or into the phy-ed classrooms or whatever and talk about all of this and actually giving them the right education, because it's just so fun to see that light bulb go off of like, what, really? And hopefully I can, change a couple of the kids' minds, but being able to give them the right education is huge.
So what can we do about these trends that we're seeing? Current research tells us that the greatest protective factor includes a strong connection between parents or guardian and a youth. So a lot of times in our education for parents, we talk about family dinners together. That's a huge step. Just being involved and being present. You don't have to have the right things to say, or there's no magic to it, but to have that connection and that relationship is the primary importance and protective factor against substance use. Protective factors also include having healthy ways to cope with painful emotions, as well as having a sense of belonging, which could mean being involved in sports, clubs, drama, other activities. Another protective factor includes maintaining basic mental health hygiene, including sleep, nutrition, exercise. And then lastly, of course, we know that being future oriented is a protective factor. So having academic goals or success helps teens stay focused on their future.
And I know as a chemical health specialist, whenever I meet with a student one-on-one or in groups, I kind of go through all of this with them and try to, do these protective factors with them, have a strong connection. The first session that I meet with them, I'm not going to just dig into it and be like, well, why were you using in the bathroom? Where did you get it? We might not even talk about why they got there. I want to know about you. I want to know about your family, kind of build that trust. Then we talk about, the emotions, how to cope with it, and the belonging. If I see him in the hallway and I don't meet with him that day, give me a high five. And the mental health and the goals. We talk about a lot of goals. What do you want to do when you're older? Where do you want to go to college? Where do you want to live? Just some of those kind of surface level things that, well, if you keep vaping or you keep using marijuana or whatever, what happens? Are you going to be able to achieve these goals? So I know as, a school person, I use these protective factors myself also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also talk about, and we'll get to it at the end here, but in our chemical awareness program. So one of our diversion services, not only do we go through that education piece, but then we talk about, your reasons for use, the positive reasons, and the positive consequences, the negative consequences, and how it affects you and how it could affect if their use continues. And so it's a good conversation. Of course, Zoom makes it a little bit harder, but I think it's really neat to see our kids share it, amongst other youth, so they can learn from that. And it's just, it's a cool deal. So also, we know that early intervention is key. We encourage parents to make it hard for teens to use by locking cabinets, utilizing prescription drug drop-off sites. Um, Parents play a huge role in modeling healthy behavior and stress management, and their own use of substances. We also teach parents to take advantage of the X plan, which you can kind of see on the side here, which allows teens to ask them to come pick them up, no questions asked, and without the fear of their friends overseeing their text.
So I've actually had a student use this. The student had just completed treatment, has been sober, was doing fantastic, and decided to venture out with his friends and got uncomfortable. And texted. They had this plan in place. Texted the ex, and mom or dad came and picked him up right away. No questions asked that night. It was just in the car. They went home, whatever. But they did talk about what happened, a couple days later, which was fantastic. Again, you don't need to interrogate them as soon as they get into the car. What are you doing? Where are you going? Because that's not going to build the trust. But this X plan is a fantastic plan and it works.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily, I tell kids, come up with your own word or your own kind of go to whatever it is, and so that you and your mom or dad know what it is, and nobody else does. So and we kind of went over this a little bit, but just to share a little bit about Youth Service Bureau and our services with youth. Of course, Nikki and I are part of the school-based chemical health services. We're contracted with District 622, so that's Maplewood, Oakdale, North St. Paul. And then 833, which is South Washington, and then 834, which is Stillwater. We are in the middle schools and high schools. And what we do is we can meet with kids individually or in groups. The kids that we see are either coming to us because what we call a concerned person, maybe they have a brother or sibling or a friend. And then also a lot of the students, especially at the middle school level, they're coming to us because their mom or dad are using. So we meet with them to talk about coping skills, the protective factors, do a lot of education around addiction and chemical use. And then, of course, we get the kids who are using themselves and either coming to us voluntarily or because of a consequence. Schools are using us to, instead of suspension, they're coming to us to get some help and get some services. We have our chemical awareness program, which is, again, part of our diversion program. And I think it sounds like Robbie might be speaking to that after us as well. But we host a class a couple of times a month for kids who got in trouble with law enforcement because of substance use, whether that was in a car or out in public or whatever it may be. And then they come to us and we do an education class and just talk about, again, just the consequences, what it means for their future, and just share more about, how they can get some help. And then lastly, we have a huge array of different podcasts and presentations, not necessarily even specific to chemical health, but everything involving young people and mental health, chemical health, screens, anything like that, curfews, bullying, all sorts of different topics.
And we also just got a question on the chat. So, do you talk about COT? I just met with a Somali mom who is concerned about her family member's youth. That is a great question. I don't know a ton about it. However, that is also on my to-do list. So I believe that it's illegal here, but also in Somalia, it's a cultural thing. It's legal. Lots of people use it. I think it's kind of like a tobacco, but I don't know a lot about it, honestly, but that is on my agenda for the year to learn a little bit more because this isn't the first time I've heard about it. So, Megan, do you know much about it?
I don't either. And I know that, we mentioned it in our, presentations to teachers and parents and things like that, but I don't know more than the basics. But that is, one of those pieces where culture is a very significant thing for us to be aware of and mindful of, and how do we address that? So,
Yep.
absolutely.
Maybe we'll do a podcast on it.
There you go. Perfect. And many of you might be aware of all these different services, but just to kind of highlight some of them, we've actually made a connection with Gobi Support, which is an online intervention program for teens and their families, kind of a step before treatment, that they can complete, and get some help and service through. So there's the Anthony Lewis Center, and I know Nikki knows a little bit more about that and the services they offer.
Yeah. So a lot of these, Anthony Lewis Center, Hazelden, Canvas House, Adult and Teen Challenge, Fairview, and St. John's Hospital, if a student, these are all, we know for a fact that adolescents can go to, if they are to the point where they need a chemical assessment, and possibly need treatment. These are kind of our core places that we would refer to. We also can do chemical health assessments. However, it gets a little dicey and a little gray when you get insurance involved and stuff. But if a student does not have the means to get to any of these places or doesn't have the family support, we are more than happy to do it and help them get the help that they need. But we do typically refer out, and these are kind of our main referral sources.
Yeah. So in addition, of course, they have, I know some of them have like inpatient and outpatient, different types of services. Hazelden does a lot of education, so they're a good resource just for more information. And of course, the YSB website as well. And then I don't know if there's anything else more to highlight for those, but as Nikki said, we know that they all see adolescents and have an array of services.
Yep. And they have, like Megan was saying, inpatient, outpatient, and they also have a day treatment program where they can get their schooling also, while they're working on their sobriety and mental health.
Yes. On that, I was gonna say we also see kids who are, coming out of treatment and just, can be a source of support during their school day.